hypothetically, that should be the correct stream key. Let me go
Hence
check my.
Snail Wave 1. Oh yes, a man of culture, I see.
Let me check my Twitch.
I
Look.
very much doubt you could play this on Twitch.
Yeah, it's
It's
probably
banned on-
banned.
it's
It's
banned on
definitely
Twitch.
banned.
Oh, can you please hold the first two waves? I'm gonna.
Yeah, I'll just buy a pyro.
Cool, thank you.
Okay.
Uh,
Here you go, Alice. Here is the stream. I'm just gonna post it in general. Oh wait, I need
Oh
that
boy.
open. I also need that open.
The one thing I suck at is like income and shit. Like I have no idea when to send.
yeah, it's a fun game to
Wait,
learn.
hold up. I need to get rid of the get rid of the chat.
I love
color.
that ping, dude.
Yeah, maximize value.
Rank 1 versus dick touching. What is wrong with you?
Dude, I'm already grinding achievements out. Knock the
Nice.
apple off the tree.
What the fuck?
Press A to pull from butt. Eat the apple. Oh! Oh, that's so disgusting.
You ate the apple.
With my ass, then I spat out the seeds. Go to the sandbox. Oh,
Could you mute your
like
voice
audio.
on the stream so we don't hear like double?
sure.
Audio, because you're starting pyro, you know that you can get to like wave 3 with making anything, so you should just build workers.
Okay. I was playing a whole bunch of fucking that chaos thing,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
and like
that's
in
good.
that shit, you don't like buy workers to like wave 3 or something. So it's like, alright then. Cool.
Fuck yes,
Yeah,
man.
What am I
John woke
watching?
to the shrill cry of his alarm clock and lay there, rigid, his usual
What is
morning condition.
happening?
But there was another reason John couldn't get out of
If he
bed.
sends
It
us
was
now
the
here, I'm
weight.
happy. If he doesn't,
A weight that had nothing to do with his muscles or
happy.
fat or
Oh, wait, no, I'm
sweaty
screwed. That
blankets.
Dragon.
John
Yeah, that
was
killed-
weighed down by a piece of paper.
big
The
red man.
invitation
Makes
to
me
his
sad.
high school reunion.
You went
From
for
across
it,
the years, the
Yeah,
words
and
he'd
you know what?
heard
I
in the
would've survived if
schoolyard
I
were
built-
still clear. You're a loser. No one will ever love you. John needed to shower and wash off the sweaty stink of desperate sadness.
I need to
John
build
threw
something
on an
wave
outfit.
4.
He didn't feel
I
comfortable wandering
think you
around
need
his
to build
home
something
naked.
small.
Most people
Actually-
would shower, then dress. But John was
I'm
running
almost
late.
certain the pyro survives this wave.
They say cleanliness is next to godliness. But at that moment, cleanliness was next to his prostate.
I'm pissed. He sent a snail? Look at this guy go.
Yeah, you need
Oh,
to
yeah.
build something before.
I'm murked that way. Super hard. Honeyflower should be enough, right?
Yeah, a honeyflower and yeah, that would be enough.
John had 3 months until the reunion to turn
What
his
a
life
day.
around. First, he needed to clean up.
Should I send something?
Yeah, you want to be sending early to get as much income as possible.
Let me just send a fucking
What
cannon
the
at
fuck?
this
You got
guy.
102? Now wait until round starts, and you'll send for 5.
Ah, what do I send on 5? Save?
John called it his study, but it
Yeah,
was
I mean,
basically
a
for
Drake would be
games
good.
and porn.
I can get it.
Mostly porn.
Yeah, get a Drake. I like this.
I'm not sure if I can even clear it from my honeycloud.
Oh, you'll be fine.
Is there a single player mode in that game? No, I mean the one they're playing.
Legion?
Yeah.
No.
John had left his apartment late, but if he
Oh,
caught the
yeah,
express bus, he might make it to work on time. John didn't really like his job, but it had 2 qualities in its favor. 1, he could
It's alright,
pay his
Dex, it
rent,
gives us extra
and
time.
2,
Can you send anything
Barbara.
else?
Currently John's top candidate
send us
for his reunion date. John noticed a moderately attractive peen waiting at the stop. He tried to start a conversation and did not get the reaction he'd hoped for. It was probably because he was a minimum wage peen. She could probably sense it.
What did you just say?
You're catching
The
a bus.
office hummed with cold fluorescent lighting. The air was cold and stale, lifeless. How long had John worked here? Long enough to deserve better.
Got that 3 fucking snails.
Yeah, so the guy that you sent that to is completely screwed.
John was late, but he felt daring. He could sneak into the office through the archives, or he could stroll through the front entrance with enough confidence to bluff his boss. John decided to creep in through the archives. Despite the obvious flaws, John thought it was a good plan and not a recipe for humiliation.
The slowest clip.
But cleared.
Yeah.
I'm gonna resend the thing.
Everyone else was hard at work, grinding away. John might actually get away with this. The boss. He homed in on John, deluging him with spit and buzzwords. The boss ran out of synonyms for John's failings and gave him an ultimatum. Barbara would definitely not be interested in dating John if he was unemployed. He had to get to the quality assurance department. There might be a faulty dildo just waiting to cost the company millions in lawsuits. John would have to test them all.
What the fuck?
Every atom of John's rectum began to vibrate with the frequencies of pure pleasure. His orifice was a paradise. This
you're
vibrator
doing
would
it.
end
Wow.
all wars.
Quality
good.
assurance. No, 50 vibes, alright?
That one was good too. The Prostate Pounder X900 series, the most advanced vibrator on the market. Sweet mother of no, John, that's too much pleasure for one anus to handle.
Imagine being the narrator.
John's butt
Oh,
hurt,
my nan
but
does
his
on
heart
sweat.
was proud. If that vibe had gotten out into the world, it could have
good.
injured a customer as badly as it had ravaged his anus.
How many buckets of chips did you buy?
A singular?
The boss arrived
Cold
and
chips
congratulated
with
John
frozen.
on taking one for the team and jumping on the hand grenade, or in this case, putting it up his butt. John was having trouble following the conversation because he was quite high on suppository
Send when this wave
painkillers.
starts.
And then the
Actually,
boss said it.
Have you got 44?
Promotion. Finally,
Yeah,
the
let's
company
send
was
on 10.
recognizing John's hard work and ignoring his minor faults like lack of talent, constant lateness, and
I'm probably not going to
flatulence.
hold this. He's going to send like 100 here. Or 120.
John's new office smelt like polished wood and
get it.
success.
Okay.
John's success.
Dino
Sam
Packer.
dropped by. He'd heard John had been hurt.
Yeah, so I'm fucked.
John said he was fine. He wasn't a softie to complain about a mildly ruptured rectum. Besides, he had a promotion to celebrate. John had met Sam in college during a sports ball
Packer,
game.
like tank
He'd
everything.
given him some stiff competition.
Do we just lose here?
I think so.
Not stiff enough. They'd started
Oh,
at
we're
Flesh
good.
Corp product
We're
testing
fine.
together. Nothing builds a friendship like a long day of dildo mounting.
Oh,
Yes, John had known Sam for a while. But John couldn't hang out with Sam. He had a reunion to prepare for. He was going out with Barbara tonight. He just had to ask her. Everyone was quiet, listening to the presentation.
when
A good
the
moment
waves
for
start,
John to ask Barbara
send
out.
a whole bunch of cannoneers.
Warmer.
Or actually, send a safety mole. And then the rest can.
That's not Barbara, John.
Can you get one of those?
Affirm it? Yeah.
Barbara
Get one of
agreed.
those instead.
Well, she nodded. Sort of. Things were really going John's way.
I probably won't be surviving. Sam. I don't have any single target.
John tried to act as suave as possible and listen to Barbara talk business. He didn't want to blow his chances at long-term love and short-term sex. Barbara began to talk about monthly feedback figures, and John started to zone out, imagining him and Barbara at the reunion, a power couple. She would make his classmates sick with envy, if he could get her to tone down the boring chatter. John's balls were gripped by certainty. Barbara was the perfect date for the reunion. John thought he would impress Barbara by going behind the bar and showing the bartender a thing or two. Despite Barbara's protests that it was unnecessary, John knew that a true gentleman should follow her home.
Do the auras stack?
He was excited.
No, you
There
can
was
only get one
still
of each.
3 months until the reunion, and he'd already landed his perfect date. All he had to do was seal the deal.
I'm not going to get one.
Barbara thanked John for the evening and politely did not invite him inside for coffee or sex, even though John had dropped some pretty obvious hints he'd be into
Being my
both.
veteran.
or just the sex? The door slammed on John's hopes. He didn't understand. He'd laughed at all Barbara's pie chart jokes. He'd listened to her boring stories. The blank eyes of the lawn flamingos were witnesses to John's shame.
They both leak.
Yeah. But we lose. I played like arse, man. I'm gonna wait for my food and then we'll get into another game.
John began the lonely walk home, thoughts tumbling like shoes in a dryer.
Stick cigarette?
He had done everything wrong. Barbara had led him
Oh,
on
it's a
just
bird,
to
right.
humiliate him.
Alright, I'll be right back.
John felt empty. How could he get love?
Could that
He
be
felt like he was missing something, some key to attracting sex. But John was
Could
shooting
also be
blanks.
called a dick butt.
What did Peens
it?
want?
Feeling empty, something missing. No, this game completes me.
Then it hit John out of nowhere. Stuff. He had the success. He just needed to show it off. But where was John going to get all the stuff he wanted? John needed a sign.
How is this a game?
A new day, a new John. He waited outside his local buttload store for it to open, eager to spend his promotion bonus on stuff. The best way to impress women.
What are you processing?
There's nothing like a rectum full of money to make a peen feel like a man.
Hey man, tip the busker. You know, we all go through the struggles, right? Where it just gets. Go through backwards.
Suddenly it occurred to John that he was going to make a lot of choices. And every one of those choices would tell the world who he was.
Oh, foodsie.
How could John decide? Just so Moorish. Maybe one more. What would a date think when they sat in John's home? Comfort or style? John went with comfort. Plus, it matched the couch he already had. John weighed up all the differences, but this was a tough choice. Something told John this was the TV for him. John chose the extremely, obviously bad TV. John realized that it was only 2 months and 29 days until the reunion. Time flies. Cactus or rose? Was John a rugged hero or a romantic poet? John had killed every plant he'd ever owned. This one would be a challenge. There was nothing John could take with him to the grave. except his coffin. Death is inevitable. Style is not. John liked to get his pizza delivered. That way he could see Delilah, the delivery peen. She always made him smile. Delilah thought pineapple on pizza was gross. This way she would never know John's shameful tastes. What bedding would Delilah prefer? John couldn't help wondering. Pizza sheets would show her that John could also deliver in bed. Devoid of any sense of style, buying new clothes would be John's toughest challenge. John decided to go with the outfit. Music, the food of love. Should John go retro sophisticated or just retro? John's personal nostalgia was more important than sound quality.
Nice outfit, dude.
Every can was made of metal, pulled from the bones of the earth, wrestled to the surface and smelted in roaring furnaces. All so John could buy peas preserved in salty water and stick them up his butt. John's new purchases were on the way to his apartment. All he had to do was invite a date over. One look at all his stuff and they'd be overwhelmed with sexual desire. John felt proud and also hungry. It gave him an idea. He
Wait,
should
you there,
invite
audio?
Delilah
Yeah.
over for dinner.
Yeah, cool. You want to see a mess up strategy?
Yeah.
You only, don't build any workers.
John
only
was
build
excited.
Units, all right?
Delilah was on
Yeah.
her way.
And
He
send,
just needed
upgrade
to
King
set the mood
early.
to romance.
Alright, fair enough.
Classy.
Soda's playing Peggle. I can't be here anymore. The true classic experience. I've got fucking bony boy. I'm in there.
John hoped she didn't have allergies.
Glorious in lane. Ah, yes.
That must be Delilah at the door.
One bony boy holds this, doesn't he?
The door opened and
yeah, he must.
there was Delilah. John gulped
just
down his
upgrade
nerves
King
and
to
invited her in.
No workers, just build
John
units.
could tell that Delilah was impressed by his stuff.
Yeah, Nico Martyr
It
as
was
well.
time to crank up the mood to seduction. John wanted to offer Delilah wine, but he'd already popped his cork. Delilah started looking as nervous as John felt. He assumed it was because she was shy too. They really
You're really
were
enjoying that game,
compatible.
aren't you?
Of course, at the reunion, he couldn't mention Delilah was a delivery peen. That would be embarrassing. Delilah suddenly headed for the door. And just like that, John was alone again. Delilah hadn't even looked at his stuff. Not even the pizza bedspread. The rejection burned. John felt insignificant. He had everything he wanted. The job, the money, the stuff. So much
Delilah's
stuff.
a bitch anyway, dude.
He
Fuck her.
wanted to destroy all of it. Shove it into the
Yeah,
abyss.
you have your pizza bed.
His stuff didn't matter. He was a shaft in the machine. A lonely piston pumping away like all the others in his rigid place. Nothing special about him. Why should Delilah or Barbara or any other peen be interested in dating him? He was just like everyone else and they could tell. John wanted to be special, but he had to face the numb truth. He
Where
wasn't.
did your bed?
And all the money and stuff he'd ever accumulate wouldn't change that.
Why can't you just
He
push
thought it would
on
make
the
him
edge?
unique, but it just made him more like everyone else. Survive this, cactus. Fuck off, inanimate objects. He should leave it all. Get out of this little town and go on an adventure. See the world. He was a boring corporate drone, but he didn't have to be. He could be a traveler, exploring jungles and climbing mountains. He could visit the wonders of the world and get his picture taken. Like Peony Island, the unspoiled paradise he'd seen on TV. That was it. John had to travel. Bags packed, John was ready to put 5,000 miles between him and his problems. John was so close, he could almost smell the freedom of the skies. Security sent John back through the detector. John had forgotten he had his nail clippers with him. He'd have to buy another pair soon, or he'd look ridiculous. When the acceleration of takeoff had slackened, John felt a sweet relief. He had left his worries on the runway. He was up in the clouds,
Trust, man, trust.
on his way to adventure. John's adventure had begun at last, and clearly it was a small world after all, and also a flat one. That
I'm not going
was
to be
going
building
to
a single
piss
unit
off the
until level
globeheads.
10, I hope you realise.
I sent you over. He's fucking you up, dude.
Yeah, fuck man.
Oh. Fair enough. Three life.
John was having fun, but something told him he needed to go home. Probably his empty bank account. John was on his way back home. He was out of money, but money can't buy love. What it can buy are the experiences that had made John a
gets out
more
of control,
interesting
you can
and
survive to
developed
10.
person, with 100 Buckstagram photos to prove it. Finally, everything was going smoothly. John felt good to be back on the familiar ground of home, but he would feel better to be on the familiar mattress of home. That's not John's bag. Not that one either. Nope. That's probably the right one. Close enough anyway. John really loved a good prick. It took John back to his summer job picking cacti. He hadn't gone back.
Okay, I think this is where I peace out. Yeah, that's more than I need to be.
200. Right.
Alright. Good night, guys.
But,
Might be on tomorrow for some more mythics if anyone else wants to. Can help out, like Kane and boost them up.
That's a prick. He's in like 3 birds.
Despite John's swell of fresh optimism,
You guys ever got
traveling was
Neanderthals on
exhausting,
your fucking
and he just
keyboard?
really wanted to get home
Not
and
fun,
get
man,
some
not fun.
sleep.
Nope.
I expect it to leak on this.
Another nightmare. John's stress about getting a date for the reunion was making him think of her.
What are you? Oh my
Harmony.
god, it's getting weirder.
He hadn't seen her in years. Would she be at the reunion? John shook off the thought. He wasn't a child. He was a fully grown penis. John's butt started to buzz. Had he left a vibrator up there? Whatever it was, he should get it out. John's old phone. They really were indestructible. It was Sam calling. He wanted to check in on John. The travel looked fun, but it was so sudden. Was John okay? Sam was such a softie, always worrying about feelings. John had only one feeling, and it was the feeling of being awesome. He
Oh, it's
could
good that
drop
they
Sam
sent
a
this wave,
text,
'cause
but
next
John
wave's
was on a
tough for you.
mission. The reunion was getting closer, and
Do you
he
know
had
about
to
the
get a
different
date.
defense types?
Fortunately,
and information like
John knew exactly where to find love. John held his breath. He was about to meet his match. He had to reassure himself he could do this. He had a good job. He had nice stuff. He had traveled. He was ready to find love. On Weena, where all his sexy travel photos would give him the pick of the pack.
Oh no.
Too skinny. Too short. Too much foreskin. Not enough foreskin. Glasses. Bangs. Nope. What a loser. Too wide.
What is your character wearing?
Yep, the pick of the pack.
Hey man, you got one though.
Yes! John had the pick of the pack. John valued honesty in a date. But
Oh
he
wow.
had been expecting a different kind of dirty.
If you know
A
what I
sexy
mean.
And much more hygienic kind.
I sent a fucking ogre.
Yeah, that's screwed. If they sent 10, they might have had a chance. They lose now.
Oh, better put that on ice. It'll be okay, John. Chick sticks cars. I hope.
Oh, the end.
After the reattachment surgery, the doctors had told John to rest. So he did, for 6 hours.
I think you hold this easily.
John was in stitches.
Maybe not both, but it's not important to hold both.
Karen had invited John straight over. She was not fooling around. Very exciting. And now she wanted him round the back. Karen let John know that the cake was only for the kids. So was the candy and the piñata. And that she'd be back in 1 hour.
Fuck, that was close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
What do I pick?
I like Venture because of how much gold you get from it, but I think you should pick Savior.
So, I'm
Yes, so save up for the yeah. Yeah, that's... What?
John laughed at Melody's hilarious bullfrog story.
That is a
She was
lot of gold to
adorable.
have.
Everything was
Sell
going
one of your archer things and then make a big unit. Whatever your biggest unit is.
fucking egg.
Oh, fuck. I think that's GG.
John never saw Melody again.
Great balls.
Oh, I didn't see the Great Wars. Okay, that's fine.
So far, Weena had been a parade of weirdos and rejections. If this date didn't work out, John vowed to give it up. But
Sorry, I'm starting to build
maybe
now, so
this time, maybe today would be his day.
PogChamp.
this is gonna be good, man.
Sharona sighed and said, "You'll do."
Sure, and you have. a
Yeah.
lot.
Yep.
What the fuck? 603 per wave. Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
It's pretty fair, right? Like,
John felt a little underdressed and a lot overwhelmed. He was surrounded by strangers, and Sharona was glaring at the muscular groom. At least John hadn't missed out on the cake. John realized that Sharona had only brought him to create some penis envy. What a terrible plan, for so many reasons. John got excited. They were going to cut the cake. "He's mine!" Sharona screamed as she launched herself at the newlyweds.
Suddenly, penises were up and yelling, "No, he's mine!" It was a no-holds-barred cockfight.
What the fuck? Get the heck out.
As John dodged flying glasses and cake, he felt a stab of envy. The groom had dozens of penises after him, and John had none. It was just wrong.
John left the screams and explosions behind him. It was a disastrous end to his online dating. He had tried everything, and it just wasn't good enough. He wasn't good enough. Swans were so simple. If you gave them bread, they liked you. But you can't take a swan to own
Freaking
you.
banana
Oh.
monk.
The first wave they leak. It begins.
John wanted what that groom had. Love. Real love. The kind that makes penises fight to the death.
I've done it. Dude.
Done. Or maybe not. That's fine. Oh, you have done it. You can actually build now.
Days later, the question was still bugging John. Why were so many penises in love with the groom? But no one loved John.
It wasn't fair. John deserved attention. He had money and Bookstagram pics of his adventures. He even still had quite a lot of stuff. What did that penis have that John didn't? Then it hit John. That penis was so strong and hard. That's what everyone wanted. That's what John wasn't. That's what John had to be to find love. It was time to hit the gym.
Right.
Yeah. I hope they're happy.
Oh. You sent quite a few cannons.
John arrived at his
They
local
clean it.
gym. A part of him couldn't believe he was here. He just wasn't a gym penis. But John had tried everything
think we
else.
still
If he wanted to get the
survive here.
perfect date, he'd need to sign up. Sam? What was he doing here? Of course, Sam was married. John's theory was right. If you get muscles, you get love. Out of nowhere, Sam asked John how he was doing. Really doing.
It's actually
For a
gonna be pretty
moment, John wanted
No,
to
we
be
don't.
honest.
We lose.
But he didn't come to gym to be a
we were so
softie.
close.
John was here
Like, if
to
we
get
make it past,
hard.
it's really
It was
that way.
John's first
I
time in a
start
gym
holding my
since
own
school.
lane, and
He
then
tried
we
not
just
to
win.
read too much into that. John had two options. He
in
could try
pieces.
month by month, or if he signed the 10-year Big
I'm not
Muscles
that-
Big Savings contract, he'd get a free easy squeezy water bottle. John wasn't a sucker. He knew the
Screams in
importance
front
of
of him if you
hydration. The gym's
Oh,
clean,
getting paid.
keen pool policy meant that John would have to do something he had never done before. Get naked in front of strangers. Maybe he
Hey,
could
you're
set a
leaking,
record
mate.
for
What have you done?
speediest cleanse.
Oh, you're gonna get circumcised or something?
John pretended he was alone and not surrounded by wrinkly, wet cocks. What was John nervous about? That he would be laughed at? There was nothing funny about a
Have
naked
watch
penis.
As you are. Is Soda Pop playing Peggle?
Yep.
Wow, it really is classic, isn't it?
But John was starting to feel good without clothes. Damn the hygiene issues of using gym equipment naked. Sam enthusiastically greeted John and offered to show him around, obviously not realizing that John was a natural athlete. Well done, John. The judges give you 3 for form, but 9 for enthusiasm.
Wow. Can you hurry up and finish this game? Yeah, who spent their own time developing
This
this
wasn't
shit?
hard. John couldn't believe Peens actually got gold medals just for
muted.
splashing around. Maybe he could become an Olympian. He was slowing down a bit, flailing a bit, but John pushed on, knowing that looking good in a Speedo was the only thing that could save him from an empty existence. John wanted to take a
chose to
break,
do this over
forever.
keys.
The pool was not his friend. It was not the blissful wet dream of his fantasies. It was a hellish prison of murderous fluid determined to drown him. No wonder life crawled out of the sea, desperate to escape the water.
What?
Done. John had not
did that come
drowned,
from?
but more importantly, he had not quit. Time to hit the weight room.
What?
John's muscles bunched and bulged. The time in the gym was already paying off. Fresh from conquering the pool, John felt ready for anything the gym could throw at him,
To this?
even heavy metal weights. Clearly, John knew how to handle equipment. Sam cheered John on, as if he needed it. Adrenaline coursed through John's veins, his butthole clenched like a fist. John was forging himself into the peen he saw on movie screens, bulging and sweat-slicked, hard and shiny. Boom! John was cocked and loaded. Didn't Sam ever get out of breath? The stream of encouragement was exhausting. John, getting flung from fast-moving objects since preschool.
Oh, make sure you wake up on the ground. What?
Like the sweet sound of spaghetti and meatballs hitting a wall. Slow and steady. That's right, John. Like a lover. Or pouring gravy. Would John ever learn? Odds are no.
Stop hitting the button.
One more time, go on.
That had gotten John's heart rate up and his life expectancy down. John was sweating like a senator on a sex tape, but he wasn't done. John took a deep breath, clenched, and pulled. Sam made this look so easy. John squashed the thought. He'd just have to push harder.
Oh my god.
John tried to make eye contact with Sam, get in his head a bit. Sam didn't seem to notice John, but John could tell Sam was impressed. Even though he still hadn't looked at John, not that it mattered to John, because John was in the zone, deep in the zone. With the sound of a deflating truck tire, John's sphincter gave out. Sam congratulated John for trying and told him it was okay to take things slow, as if John was going to quit. Well, he wasn't. John had a mission, and the reunion was getting closer.
Transitions. It's like there's a montage going on. Smash that meat. What's this reunion? I mean, after this, man, nah, you don't want one. You'll meet one there. It was so swell. Squeeze your butthole. Destroy that chicken. What? You're a speedy one. Dominate that liquid. Work that sphincter. Found that protein. And there's more chicken on your desk. Oh, look at that, your self-worth went up. If only it would work in real life. Yeah. Whoa. Oh, she ran away, man. What? Bait it, dude. Bait it. No, you didn't bait it. Oh. Just a... What? You went backwards. Is that a skeleton? Get ruined. Oh no, whatever you did worked.
As soon as John woke up, the mirror called to him.
Why'd it become all
His
snaky?
abs looked like a pack of vacuum-sealed hot dogs. Tasty. Jim had remade John into a sculpted Adongus. He was finally
Yeah, you're
everything
toned,
a peen
you-
should
you
be.
got the weights going.
Successful, travelled, and photogenic. It was time for his morning pre-gym workout.
Oh, you got one step
The
left.
reunion invitation caught John's eye. He read it again and again. Stunned. He'd gotten the date wrong. Very wrong. The reunion was tonight. Tonight! He'd have to go alone. They'd all be there, and they'd look at John and they'd know he was still a loser. No, there was still time. John needed a date fast. He'd have to go out. He'd have to make an impact.
I like how
John
you
had to
pace
dress
around
his
as if
best.
you were in that
Only
situation.
better.
You're like,
Oh my, John. Welcome to the gun show. There had to be someone single and desperately alone in the city. Someone besides John. He just had to find them. John went straight to the nearest bar. Sure, it was still early, but he couldn't waste any time. There must be some day drinkers he could
yeah,
pick
let's
up.
go ahead and nose ring.
It was a classy place. Even the vomit was high quality. The bouncer looked like a hagfish that had taken up lacrosse. Much better.
Dude, that thing's vomiting on.
John stepped into the bar and saw her. The answer to the question, what was John's purpose? Her. Loving her. Being with her. Taking her to the reunion. Their eyes met and John knew she felt the same. Gladys did not feel the same. But John wasn't going to give up on their life together. A couple of drinks would loosen her up to their destiny. Wow, Gladys was not an amateur when it came to drinking. John had to keep up. It was working. Gladys was definitely warming up to John. John's bladder was very full. It sloshed audibly as he moved. John needed to get to the bathroom right away. Holy balls! John had never felt such relief.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
John looked around. Gladys was gone. John cursed his petite bladder. The bored bartender shrugged and told John Gladys had left because some creep was trying to get her drunk.
The cockpit.
John's anxiety had sunk under the surface of the beer he'd drunk, while his confidence was floating high. This was the place he'd find love. It was empty, except for the bartender. Clearly this bar's only special was unhappy hour. 2 for 1 was a good deal, though, and so far the beer had lifted John's spirits. Another 4 would make him feel twice as good. The
bartender gave John a smile that set his heart hammering. He had to impress her. What was so offensive about offering a big tip in exchange for a date? John had thought bartenders loved tips. He needed to find a better club, one with a vibe. John was drawn by the pulse of the music. It pulled him forward like a moth to a fiery death. John was running out of time to find a date and prove that he wasn't a loser. Dancing, the real way to flirt, the way of animals, of wild sexual creatures. John strutted and shook his booty. With booze buzzing round his head, John found himself on the dance floor. Everyone was up close and sweaty. John was exhilarated. He felt alive. John was working himself up to try a little bump and grind. It was a moment out of a movie. John alone on the dance floor with a gorgeous penis, their sexual chemistry exploding. She moved away, coyly. John could tell when someone was playing hard to get. He let her marinate in the tension before making his move.
Yeah, man, you can't go without a date.
John wasn't taking no for an answer. Some people have no sense of fun, but John was certain the next bar would be different. The next bar wasn't different. John couldn't understand why everyone was so sensitive. It was like no one wanted to have a good time. Like no one had a sense of humor. John had meant that as a compliment. When did the world get so uptight? John's ego was as bruised as his shaft. He had to admit it. He'd failed. He was where he belonged, in a creepy murder alley covered in trash.
Bruises his shaft.
John would have to go through the garbage to get out. Oh, that's gross. Oh, it's so moist, but textured. It smells like rotting dick yogurt. John's misery was sour in his mouth. He needed a drink to wash it down. There was still one bar he hadn't been kicked out of yet. John had cleaned himself up as much as possible. He really needed a mint.
Going alone.
John got it in. But he needed more to satisfy the machine. Nailed it.
John let out his anger, his frustration. Life was a shitty joke. It wasn't
Oh,
fair.
man.
You want to mess with John? Do you? This is what you get. Fuck you, you fucking thing. You had one job. Die, 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 die!
Wow, this commentary's
That's
got
how you get what you want. John wanted the strongest drink they had. Rough night? Someone asked John. He hadn't noticed her when he came in, but now he did. It really had been a rough night for John, but he felt a little better that someone cared enough to ask. It was a pity they were only sort of attractive. But destiny had given John a second chance. John made his move. Unfortunately, according to Alice and to her boyfriend Chadrick, it was the wrong move.
John lost it.
How had John gotten into this mess? He asked himself, as though he hadn't punched first. Get him, John! I can't watch. Don't hold back! Oh my God! John had survived. No, he'd won. He'd won. He'd won. He wasn't a loser. And there was the proof lying in a bruised, bloody heap. John didn't need a date to the reunion. He needed to go over there and beat the pre-cum out of those dicks. High school reunion, the perfect time to teach someone a lesson. The doors of the school, a sight John had dreaded every day for years, and now he was going willingly through them, unafraid, fueled by years of unprocessed anger fermented in loneliness. John was back. The chickens were coming home to roost, and they were all cocks.
These were the Peanlets he'd grown up with, now with jobs and marriages and beer bellies. John was surprised at how ordinary they had all turned out.
He spotted them, John's tormentors. Time for them to feel the wrath. Don't let up! Whoa! How do you like that?
Ha! Who's a loser now? Who?
Ah! That's the stuff, John. Dodge! Pow!
I can't believe you're still playing this.
Ha!
I mean,
John
the story,
had won.
man. You're
He'd
invested.
won. No one could say John was a loser now. John's primal joy faded as he saw how the other penises looked at him. Not like a winner, like he was trash.
Oh, John.
John tumbled down the steps, hitting every bruise on his length and his ego. It was her, Harmony. She had been at the reunion. She'd seen it all and followed John out to laugh at him more? No, to see if he was all right. Why did that hurt John so much? This was John's chance to ask her. Why, all those years ago, she'd said to him, "No one will ever love you." Harmony stared at John in shock. How could John not know why? Didn't John remember what he'd done?
This is just the start of the gaming. There's worms in the apple. What the fuck?
There was nothing Sam enjoyed more than the fresh air of an early morning. The dew sparkling on the grass, the music of the trees, space to think. What was that smell? It made Sam's eye water.
Look at the ducks, man.
It was John, passed out and crusted with vomit and regret. John was awake and tolerably clean. Sam tried to be gentle and invited John to join him on his walk. Sam coaxed John along. It was like herding compost. John couldn't answer Sam's questions yet. How had he ended up such a wreck? Sam couldn't resist the tasty treat. But they were so good.
This controller I want.
If only John could fly away from his pain as easily. Sam saw his friend's misery. He suggested they keep going. John wanted to know something. Why didn't anyone love him? As soon as he said it, he felt like a softie, whining about his feelings. Sam didn't make fun of him. Sam asked him to go on. And so John told him the whole story about how hard he'd made himself and how unfair it felt, and everything he'd done.
How hard he'd made
Saying it out loud, John realized he'd sounded like an asshole. But he'd done everything right. Why didn't he get what he wanted? Why didn't John get love? Wanting someone isn't the same as loving them, said Sam. You'll figure it out, John. But you have to keep trying. How about a bike ride? Sam asked. John struggled to get his balance, but Sam told him not to give up. John kept trying, getting better as they went.
fuck up.
I mean, it is about dicks, so I would not be surprised. Just two dicks running along.
John and Sam stopped and looked at the sunset. For a moment, John let himself be quiet and listen to the world and look at how beautiful it could be.
I just heard you take the screenshot.
Life can be hard, said Sam, but that doesn't mean we have to be.
So is the moral of the story, don't Yeah, I was gonna say don't like shove A, B hard on the grass. Oh, please paint. With the knife. Taunt it, taunt it, taunt it. Oh man, she got fucked. You're still going for fucking. This publisher is actually a well-known publisher. Did oh, we could have done a plus 18, a few of them, and you relatable, right?